As a keen urban explorer, I was no stranger to venturing into abandoned places that held secrets from the past. These forgotten relics of history fascinated me, drawing me in with their mysteries, eerie beauty, and the silent stories that they harboured. The Forest Haven Asylum had always been a subject of both curiosity and fear in the urban exploration community. It was the kind of place that had a scary encounter linked to it with every story told. Little did I know, I'd be another one adding to it. The decision to visit the asylum wasn't made lightly. It was a combination of my insatiable curiosity and the thrill of the unknown that pushed me to explore its decaying halls. I had heard tales of paranormal encounters and unexplained phenomena, but that wasn't going to stop me. I was never a believer in that kind of stuff anyway. Getting to the asylum was quite a trip. The drive there was long and seemed to drag for a long time, so it was a good job that I had packed plenty of snacks and drinks for the road. But eventually I made it to the asylum. This place had clearly seen better days, and I couldn't help but wonder about the stories it held within its dilapidated frame, the suffering, the fear, and the despair that must have gone on in this place over the years. I'm not gonna lie, the place was a haunting sight, and I kinda wish I didn't come alone. But I was here now, and there was no way I was turning back at this point. I pulled up an old access road on the south side of the building, which was where most people in the Reddit community said was the best place to stop and gain access to the building. And just like I had read, I went into the wooded area and walked parallel to where I had parked the car, and eventually I came across the path that led me into the asylum. Stepping inside felt like the real deal. I knew there was no turning back now. The old entrance area was a sad sight, with peeling wallpaper and the musty smell hanging in the air. It was like stepping into a different era, frozen in time. The place was supposedly never properly shut down. There were documents scattered all over the place, and the place was also littered with old furnishings. The inside of the asylum matched the creepy vibe outside. It was dead silent, except for the occasional scurrying of little critters and the calling of some crows. The place smelled damp and neglected, just like you'd expect from something that had been abandoned for ages. But you wouldn't believe the things I found in the asylum. The whole place was like a time capsule of eerie and disturbing details. It felt like each room held its own chilling story. The asylum was riddled with patient records and paperwork scattered everywhere. It was as if they just up and left without bothering to tidy up. There were logs detailing the most mundane tasks, like how to dress or eat, which struck a strange chord. I mean, can you imagine having your every move documented like that? In one room I stumbled upon a decaying piano in the corner. The keys were weathered and missing, but it was almost as if you could hear the ghostly tunes it might have played in its heyday. It was haunting to say the least. The medical equipment that was lying around was another level of eerie. There were rusted, obsolete machines, restraints, and examination tables that spoke volumes about the outdated and questionable practices of the past. The whole place had this eerie sense of being frozen in time. Furniture sat as if it was waiting for someone to return, and personal items, clothes, shoes, even toys were left behind, as if the former occupants had rushed out in a hurry. The corridors seemed endless, and the dimly lit hallways made it feel like a maze. Each turn revealed another room with a story of its own. Some were just empty, while others still held the echoes of suffering. Straitjackets thrown in corners, damaged walls where someone had clearly tried to break free. I kept exploring, heading deeper into the asylum, but the day was slipping away faster than I had anticipated. The fading light filtering through the shattered windows served as a reminder that my exploration had come to an end, so I decided it was time to head back out. I made my way back to one of the stairwells and began descending the stairs. But as I began to descend, my heart skipped a beat. The moment my foot hit the next step, I heard it. Heavy, echoing footsteps coming from the stairs above. Panic shot through me as I realised I was not alone in this asylum. I didn't need any further convincing, and I wasn't going to stop to see who or what was coming down the stairs, especially when I was there alone. I sprinted down the stairs, my breath quick and shallow, the adrenaline coursing through my veins. The footsteps above were relentless, and it was clear that whoever or whatever was up there had also quickened their descent. Every corner and doorway became a desperate attempt to find an escape route. My memory was blanked, and the darkness and the ever-present sense of disorientation didn't make it any easier. The asylum seemed to stretch out infinitely, in all directions, like a maze designed to keep me contained. I eventually recognised the area from which I gained access into the building, but the sound of my pursuer's footsteps grew louder and more menacing. I quickly clambered out of the building. The fresh air hit me like a lifeline as I stumbled out of the asylum and back into the wooded area. I paused in the tree line, eager to see if whoever had chased me out would reveal themselves, but a sense of relief and frustration came over me as they never did. I stayed hidden in the tree line till the sun had completely gone down, as I didn't know if whoever pursued me was doing the same as me, looking for a sign of movement to continue the chase. Once darkness eventually camouflaged me, I hastily made my way back to the car and left the Forest Haven Asylum in my rearview mirror once and for all. Hiking had always been my way of clearing my head and escaping the demands of daily life. On this particular day, I set out on an ordinary trek through the dense woods near my house. I tried to take a different route all the time. You always discover some of the coolest places that way. On this day I hit up a trail that took me to the north. But as I ventured further down the trail, I was drawn away by the sound of running water in the distance. I didn't know any streams ran through the area, and curiosity took me in the direction of the sound. I knew I was getting closer as the sound was becoming clearer, louder and more distinct. The sound eventually led me to a beautiful waterfall, so I sat down on the bank to relax and take in the sights and the sounds of the surrounding area. And as I looked around, something in the distance caught my attention. Slightly obscured from the trees was a tattered and run-down cabin. Now, I am the curious type, so I decided to venture closer to get a better look. It stood weathered and dilapidated, with creeping ivy embracing its wooden exterior. A mixture of curiosity and a tinge of unease prompted me to move even closer to get a glimpse of whether or not anything was inside. And so I did. I stepped onto the porch and peered through the dirty glass, but I couldn't really make anything out. So I decided to test the door, and to my surprise, it was unlocked. I cautiously pushed the door open to get a look inside. The place looked like it had been abandoned for years. The interior was a scene frozen in time, like its former occupants had suddenly vanished. Dust covered the furniture, cobwebs clung to the corners, and a layer of musty air hung thick. It felt like a portal to a different era. Curiosity pushed me inside, where I spotted a staircase towards the back of what I assumed must be the living room, and I slowly made my way upstairs, the wooden steps protesting with every footfall. The room above was eerily empty, save for a dusty, tattered dresser that seemed to beckon from the corner. As I approached the dresser, I noticed a hole in the rotting wooden floor, giving me a view of the cabin's ground floor. This place seemed ready to fall down, and I didn't fancy injuring myself this far from the trail, so I turned to make my way back down the stairs. But it was at this moment that I heard it, a rustling outside. My heart raced, and I dared not make a sound. I heard footsteps on the porch, and the front door swung open and slammed shut. Through the hole in the floor I caught a glimpse of a man stepping into the cabin. He moved across the cabin floor dragging his feet, his identity shrouded in the dimming light. My instincts kicked in, and I knew I needed to stay hidden. I crouched down on all fours and gingerly made my way to the corner of the room upstairs and hid beside that old tatty dresser. I shallowed my breathing and prayed that he wouldn't become aware of me being there. The man moved around the cabin like he was looking for something. I couldn't tell if he was the occupant or just someone whose curiosity had gotten the better of him like me, but eventually he had settled into an old armchair and appeared to be transfixed on the window that had seen better days. It was as if he were lost in his own thoughts. Minutes stretched into hours, and I remained still as a statue, waiting for the man to make a move. Time had marched on, and the forest outside was pitch black, along with the cabin. The silence was only interrupted by the occasional creak of the floorboards and a faint whisper of the wind outside. Gradually I heard the soft rhythmic sound of the man's breathing growing steady. It seemed he had settled into an uneasy slumber. I knew this was my chance to escape this strange and eerie encounter. I carefully inched myself away from the dresser and made my way towards the stairs. I gradually and slowly made my way down the stairs, my feet eventually meeting the solid ground, and I tiptoed towards the door. Every second felt like an eternity, and as I reached for the cabin door, and despite my pounding heart and racing thoughts, I couldn't help but glance back one last time. With cautious trepidation, I turned around to see if the man was still in the armchair. My breath caught in my throat, as I locked eyes with the man sitting in the chair. "What are you doing in my house?" he shouted. I was paralysed, unable to tear my gaze away from him. My mouth opened, but no words came out. Time seemed to stand still, and the cabin's silence hung heavily in the air. The man jumped out of his chair. Then, as if the universe itself had intervened, the man stumbled as he lunged towards me, his foot catching on an unseen obstacle, and he fell to the floor with a loud thud. The crash echoed through the cabin, and I seized the opportunity. Without a second thought, I sprinted out the door, not daring to look back. My heart raced as I raced through the forest, my escape route filled with adrenaline and fear. The sound of footsteps followed me for a moment, but they quickly faded, muffled by the thick underbrush. I finally emerged from the woods. I'd never sprinted so far in my life. But who knows what that man would have done to me? He lunged at me after all. The encounter in the cabin had been inexplicable and bone-chilling, but luck had been on my side that day, and I never returned to that cabin, and I have never gone down that trail again since. Me and Tim were always up for an adventure, and that Sunday afternoon we decided to explore the abandoned brickworks factory on the outskirts of town. It had been there for as long as I could remember, looming on the edge of our small town like a forgotten relic from another time. The factory's exterior was a patchwork of broken windows and crumbling brick walls, the faded remnants of a once bustling industry. The place had an eerie aura, like a graveyard for forgotten dreams. We were drawn to it, maybe because we were young and curious, or maybe just because it was something to do. As we ventured inside, the floor was scattered with broken bricks and broken glass which crunched beneath our feet, and we exchanged knowing glances, our excitement mounting. It felt like stepping into a different world, where time had come to a standstill. The factory was a maze of rusted machinery and peeling paint, each room telling its own story of years gone by. Tim and I explored the ground floor, our flashlights cutting through the darkness, revealing discarded bricks and forgotten tools. We climbed a creaky staircase to the second floor, our steps echoing through the empty space. It was a different world up there, the wooden floorboards worn smooth by time. We passed by what must have been the old supervisor's office, its windows offering a view of the entire factory floor. In one room we found a pile of old newspapers, the headlines yellowed with age. They told tales of labour strikes, workers' rights, and the rise and fall of the factory's fortunes. The history was written there, etched in newsprint. As we moved further into the factory, Tim started acting strange. Now, he had always had a wicked sense of humour, and was known for his pranks, and I could tell he was up to something. He kept whispering, "Did you hear that?" and would point his flashlight towards dark corners, making me jump. It was all in good fun, or so I thought. But then came the prank that pushed me over the edge. We entered a room with an old rusty conveyor belt snaking through it. Tim suddenly yanked on my arm and pointed his flashlight at the conveyor belt. "Look, man, look! There's something there," he exclaimed. I turned to see what he was pointing at, heart pounding in my chest, but there was nothing there. Just an empty room and the eerie silence of the factory. I was furious. "Dude, cut it out. This isn't funny," I snapped, my irritation getting the best of me. Tim chuckled, trying to play it off as a joke, but I was fed up. I decided to give him a taste of his own medicine, and told him I was heading back outside. He followed me, still trying to laugh it off, but I could tell he was a little uneasy. The atmosphere in the factory had grown tense, and I was eager to leave it behind. And that's when we stumbled upon something we shouldn't have. We entered a room with an eerie flickering glow, and the floor was lined with lit candles. My heart sank as I realised what we had stumbled upon, something far more unsettling than any prank Tim could pull. The candles created a strange, almost ritualistic ambience that sent shivers down my spine. In the centre of the room, a crude pentagram had been drawn in red paint, its lines jagged and uneven. Surrounding it were cryptic symbols and words scrawled in a language I couldn't decipher. My heart raced, and I felt a growing sense of dread. We were intruders in a place that we had no business in being. Tim thought it was some elaborate prank that I had set up before we came to the factory, but this wasn't the case. He didn't believe me, and before I could stop him, he extinguished the candles around the pentagram, kicking dust at them from the floor. The room fell into darkness, and the silence was deafening. But then from somewhere deep within the factory we heard a door slam shut with a resounding echo. We stood frozen by fear, our ears straining to catch any further sounds. The factory was silent, and all we could hear was the sound of our own breathing. "Do you believe me now?" I whispered. A sense of unease settled over us as we strained our hearing, trying to remain silent. Our flashlights trained on the dark, still room. Then a loud bang reverberated through the factory, and it was closer this time. We didn't hesitate. We ran for the exit, our footsteps echoing in the silence. The factory, once an adventure, had turned into a nightmarish labyrinth, and we had to escape it. As we burst out into the night, gasping for breath, the door of the factory slammed behind us with a resounding thud. Our hearts raced, and we couldn't comprehend what had just happened. Tim's pranks had escalated into something far more terrifying, and we had stumbled across something that we shouldn't have. We ran back to town, our nerves still jangling, the factory looming in the distance. Its dark silhouette against the night served as a stark reminder of the inexplicable events that had transpired within those decaying walls. We had learned a valuable lesson that day, not to mess with things that we did not understand.